In the previous lecture, we had discussed about what are roadmaps, how roadmaps tie to the goals, to the vision of the company, and eventually from the company, they eventually roll it down to the organization. We talked about prioritization, how things will be prioritized. We talked about what are the different ways we can get a roadmap from, like customer side, like student side, like sales side, like operation side. We talked about all of those things, right? Once a roadmap is made, it comes, even though it looks like a list of features, right? If once a roadmap is made, what typically happens is post the roadmap, we eventually move towards a robust release and a post release management structure. Does that make sense? रोडमैप के बाद हम रिलीज और पोस्ट रिलीज की तरफ जाते हैं. There are a list of features that you have selected that will be part of your strategy. Now, as part of your strategy, after the roadmap, what will happen is that most of the people will move towards a release and a post-release management kind of a structure. Okay? Now, release management outlines the critical stages of your release, right? It's release basically means एक feature आपने सोचा, you wrote the PRD of the feature, you got the designs of the feature. Now you go to engineering and engineering को जाके बोलते हो कि मुझे ये feature बनाना है. This is the feature I want to make. Now engineering, once it sees the feature, engineering वहां से बोलती है ठीक है, let's plan it out in a process of 5 steps. Number 1, planning. Number 2, building. Number 3, testing. Number 4, deploying. Number 5, reviewing. I'll repeat: plan, build, test, deploy and review. In 5 stages में आपका release होता है, और release comes from the word release itself, right? That you're releasing something to the customer. Does that make sense? Now what you have to understand is the first part of a release is called planning. The planning phase covers the entire piece of the release planning. Like, it comes from taking the requirement to writing a concept note. Concept note होता है basically a small note that you write for design to eventually design things. एक जैसे ही तुमने requirement ली, you write a concept note. Concept note के अंदर basically you write about things, basically what are the things that designers should take care of so that when they design a particular thing, it makes sense. So you write a concept note. After a concept note, the designers design whatever you have built. मतलब जैसे मान लो तुम्हें एक लॉगिन फ्लो बनाना है और तुमने लॉगिन फ्लो का एक कॉन्सेप्ट नोट लिखा और वो तुम्हें डिजाइनर्स को दे दिया, और कॉन्सेप्ट नोट में लिखा कि लॉगिन फ्लो अच्छा होना चाहिए, स्मूथ होना चाहिए, इसमें परसेंटेज ऑफ पीपल हु इवेंचुअली ड्रॉप ऑफ शुड कम डाउन फ्रॉम 80% to 60%, whatever, ABCD, whatever it is, right? So you write about the concept note. Concept note के बाद designers will design on the concept note, and then while they are designing, you'll write a PRD. PRD में you will cover all the edge cases that there can be covered. You cover all the edge cases, you cover all the high level solutions, you cover all the metrics, you cover all the designs, all of those things in a PRD, and you give it to engineering. Engineering then eventually reads the PRD, writes their questions, you answer those questions, you do all of those things, and eventually try to cover 4 things in the design, in the plan phase. Number 1, you will get the timelines and the estimates that basically this release is going to go when. Second, आपको delivery dates मिल जाएंगी. Third, सारी requirements cover हो जाएंगी. 4, overall scope of the project. So this is something that you will cover in the planning phase. Does that make sense? और इसमें time लगता है 1 से 2 हफ्ते in general. 1 to 2 weeks it takes. The second phase comes the build phase. In this phase, when all your requirements are finalized, right? Engineering will start building it out, and they will write code in order to build that particular. So you will do a stand-up. तुमने सुना भी होगा कि engineering stand-up में क्या होता है. So stand-up basically happens in the build phase, where the product manager will go every day and ask the engineering that what is right, what is not right, how does it make sense, does it make sense, right? Then and any problems that you're currently facing while you are writing code. So all of those things are covered in the build phase. Then the third stage comes, that build phase also covers the testing part of the cycle. Testing part basically means that anything that has to be built, the QA team will start testing it out on a production server, on a stage server. What I mean by stage is a testing server. and they will start looking at all the code, all the features that engineering is making. This is also covered in the build phase. Third part हमारा फिर आता है user acceptance testing, right? User acceptance testing, also known as UAT, is when the end user actually get the product to use it and get feedback. So UAT के time पे the PM will eventually do the UAT, or there can be UAT done by a beta group of users who eventually will do UAT and try to understand that is there any, like मैं एक छोटा सा example देता हूँ. When Apple has to release any new iOS, they first write a developer beta program in which people can eventually use the version of that iOS, but it's in beta phase, it has bugs. तो UAT में भी हम वही करते हैं. We try to find out the major flows and look at the fact that whether there are bugs, whether we should move this to production or not, and give feedback to basically the development team and the testing team. So user acceptance testing is the most crucial step to release management, because the amount of data collected and fixes required in order to get the build is needed for the official launch. Does that make sense? Awesome. I'll move to the next stage. Then the prepare release. In the prepare release basic phase, the step is that we will eventually do everything and do it in the UAT and remove, मतलब सारा UAT होने के बाद we will eventually do the final quality review by the QA team in the prepare release stage. Final quality last. Okay, so Ashutosh has asked, UAT can be done for a feature or entire product. Actually, it is done for a list of features. If there are a list of features, for every feature you have to do a UAT. It is important. Yeah. So in the prepare release stage, the QA team does regression testing. What I mean by regression testing is that they will test everything other than the current feature and try to understand that the current feature has any impact on the additional features that are built. कि हमने जो बाकी features बनाए हैं वो कहीं current feature से affect तो नहीं हो रहे हैं. That is also something that the QA team does. The QA team will eventually build all the minimum acceptable criteria, business requirements, everything, and eventually they will give a sign off. कि हाँ यार, अब हम basically release कर सकते हैं. This is something that we have to do. Then the next part comes the deploy release part. In the deploy release part, this is when your team's hard work is actually going to the customer. Now, a lot of times we don't deploy 100%. Correct. Avinash, absolutely right. So Avinash is saying regression testing is kind of integration testing. Absolutely. It is like integration testing only. So in the deploy release part, what you eventually do is, it is your hard work that has come out. So it will go to the customers, and the customers will give actual feedback about the product. कि product अच्छा है कि नहीं है, is it right or not right. Now what I want you to also understand is कि हम जब release करते हैं ना, we don't fundamentally release 100% completely to the audience. We use tools so that we can release 10% to the audience first and see what are their feedback on that 10%. Then move it to 20%, then move it to 30%, then move it to 80%, then from 80% move it to 100%. Okay, so Atharv has asked a question. Hi Shravan, do we need edge case visibility in UAT as well? See, Atharv, yes, to a certain level, if it's a primary flow, if it's a major flow, if it's a primary flow, then you have to take care of it in UAT. In UAT, we don't cover edge cases. Edge cases QA team करती है. In UAT, we cover the primary flows which you know that will affect the customer. So if the edge case is in the primary flows, then definitely take their feasibility into account. If the edge case is not in the primary flows, then it's fine. Then QA team will take care of it. So that in the deploy release stage, what you do is you deploy 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, 60%, and you deploy in that way and eventually take the release to 100%. And then you realize, and by that time you've also deployed business metrics, like for measuring the solution. Right? So you have put forward metrics and you have put forward tools to measure the success of your solution. So if you want to measure the success of your solution in that aspect, just take that particular particular flows and try to look at those flows which are extremely important for someone to eventually move to and call the release a successful release. So you use tools like MoEngage, CleverTap, things like that to look at your product core flows, and that is extremely important. That is the deploy release stage. Now the next part would be, for instance, users should be notified of changes with the release and how to operate within the new features. All of those things should be depending on how you are going to release your current features, which eventually go to the customer, right? Finally, during the deployment stage, the development team should meet to access the release performance. You also cover the release performance in the deployment stage. Basically, from an engineering side, that whether the feature is okay, whether the feature is doing fine, whether the feature is meeting all the performance criteria, which are engineering criteria. That is also something that you measure. Does that make sense? Give me yes or no, guys. यहाँ तक पूरा release वाला process समझ में आ गया? मतलब I think starting from planning to deploying, is this clear to you guys? So now after the release is done, there is something that is called as post-release management, right? After the release is done and it's going to the customers, the QA team goes on the production server and eventually tries to get all the issues that are extremely critical, and they do a production sanity, so that basically production पे कोई issue नहीं है. Production का मतलब होता है final release which goes to the customer. Production पे कोई issue नहीं आना चाहिए. तो post release QA team वैसा करती है. ठीक है? After the release is done in a phased manner, right? They try to crash bugs and fix them, right? Then basically we keep look at the API calls, production logs. We keep looking at all of those things in order to fundamentally understand that the product is stable, right? And we also look at the business KPIs such as adoption, retention, business metrics, things like that, so that we eventually say that the product is doing how we intended it to work. तो ये भी हम साथ में करते हैं. Starting from QA team does the sanity, the developer team looks at critical tech metrics, the business team looks at business metrics, and we keep looking at in order to finally say that the release has done something good or not. Okay, so this is where we'll stop today. Please like the video and share it with your friends. Chalo, bye.